happened before, and there is a precedent for this, and I've never seen anything like this before. I've never seen anything like this before. What an amazing 24 hours. An amazing 24 hours. First off, Pete Carroll. Word spreads real fast yesterday afternoon. I think it was about, 90 minutes after we got off the air. Pete Carroll's good. He's gone. Just yesterday, just 2 days ago, on my former station, Seattle Sports 710, he was on the saying, "Yeah, I am coming back. I'm going to be the head coach of this team. I am not." And it was a question of retirement because obviously Pete Carroll was at the time the second oldest head coach in the NFL. And after the win, but with the Green Bay Packers win, the end of the season on Sunday, Pete Carroll came out and was like, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be the head coach of this team. We're building something. We're real close." And it seemed like, all right, well, that's that. Then out of nowhere, boom. Everybody go to their phone. Pete Carroll's moving to an administration role. A mutual parting of the ways is what Jody Allen said. A mutual parting of the ways. And so you wonder, all right, so did Pete Carroll have the meetings with the players and maybe just go to bed one night and I can't do it anymore. I'm going to move to an administrative role. Let's get some new eyeballs, a new voice in here. We've built something great here. Let's continue to it. And you know what? I can still be a part of this and move to a not just an administrative role, but just kind of an ambassador role. That's the word I was thinking of an ambassador, just a goodwill ambassador for Seattle Seahawks football. Pete Carroll, you get to do all the glad handing, and you don't have to take any of the losses. It's show off your Super Bowl ring and remember that time and hey 12s and also keep your hands, somewhat. And then you go to the press conference and Pete Carroll was like, I competed hard to stay the head coach of this team. Now he is a positive guy, and it's one thing I've always loved about Pete Carroll is from a coaching perspective, always never threw players under the bus. Could have a lot. Never threw players under the bus. And probably annoyed, I think, some media members, probably annoyed some of the more bitter fans of why it's the positivity, enough of it. But always, and I'm watching this press conference and I'm like, that is not a guy that wants to move to an administrative role. This is not a retirement press conference. The Seattle Seahawks essentially told him, you are not coaching next year. Now, you want to call that being fired? You want to call that being demoted? You can call it mutual parting of the ways all you want. Sounded an awful lot like Pete Carroll wanted to be the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. And the Seahawks did not. Now, I can't possibly fathom why. Unless they have somebody else in mind, I don't know. Don't know if this is a Jody Allen move. I don't know if can't possibly be a John Schneider move, the GM of the Seahawks. Because him and Pete Carroll have worked side by side for the entire 14-year run. So we're going to dive into that because now the Seattle Seahawks have an opening at head coach. So Brenden and I were texting back and forth yesterday, maybe potential guests, and we're like, man, what's going on there and how we're going to talk. And then out of nowhere, right before dinner time, Nick Saban is retired as the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, which, I mean, absolute shocker of a move. And my mind instantly goes to the bad parts because, listen, I've been through this a couple of times. Because I remember when Jimbo Fisher left Florida State, and it felt like the Oregon coach's dream job might have been Florida State. It was. Now, it turned out to be a bit of a nightmare for old Willie Taggart down there in Tallahassee, but that move led to Mario Cristobal. Mario Cristobal continued recruiting, put Oregon at 2021. Oregon was number 6 in the country, ran into a buzzsaw in Utah. Okay, couple buzzsaws in Utah, 2 losses in 3 weeks. And all of a sudden, Miami is open. It's like, Mario Cristobal's from Miami. He played at Miami. He was featured in the documentary The U. There's no way, right? Yep. Dream school. He's gone. Whew. Alabama's open. All right. Dan Lanning coached at Alabama. It was 1 year, but Dan Lanning did coach at Alabama. Nick Saban earlier this year said, I wanted to hire Dan Lanning as a defensive coordinator when he was at, I think it was Florida State or Memphis or somewhere. He said, I wanted to hire Dan Lanning as a defensive coordinator. Kirby got him the day before. So that put Dan Lanning in Georgia. Georgia would win back-to-back national championships under Dan Lanning's defense. Dan Lanning would then obviously come out to Oregon, be 2 field goals away from being in the college football playoff. Really, 1 field goal away. There's no way. There's no possible way that this could happen again. And Dan Lanning, after Texas A&M opened, he came out to the podium and he looked the camera right in the eye and he was like, look, you guys don't understand what I got here. You don't understand what I got here. I got everything I need. I got financial backing. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, I got financial backing. I got NIL because you look at the amount of Oregon players that are NFL eligible that are coming back to Eugene, and you don't think they're just doing that out of the goodness of their heart or because they want to go to sociology class. They're getting paid. I got all the resources with regard to budgeting for assistant coaches, with regard to facilities, with Nike's innovation. We got everything. We got everything we need to win right here. And that was the message he sent out to Texas A&M. And we all were like, yeah, that makes sense. Because if you look at the last, 30 years of college football, Texas A&M hadn't done jack. It was a fun little run with Johnny Football, but if you recall, didn't go to the BCS that year. Had a good COVID year under Jimbo Fisher, but other than that, has massively underperformed. Texas A&M has been kind of the biggest flop in college football in the last 30 years. Alabama's open now. And everybody at Oregon knows that while Dan Lanning, in his introductory press conference, because he knew coming into this job that it was a fan base that was hurt, was scorned, I would say. He had a fan base that was like twice, and he came in and he's like, yep, unless, my dream school, my alma mater, it's Division II, or I think NAIA, or he made the whole joke about it. Kirby Smart's going to be at Georgia forever, right? That would probably be a spot where maybe he would leave Oregon for. It's like, but Kirby Smart's not leaving Georgia anytime soon. He just won back-to-back national titles, and everybody kind of knew, oh, boy, if there was ever a job, it'd be Alabama. Well, Nick Saban's going to coach forever, right? Well, the panic has set in. Welcome to the nightmare scenario, everybody. Now, I went to bed last night. I was probably 80% Lanning's gone. As I went to bed last night with some of the things I saw on Twitter, and I'm pretty good at deciphering the credible-ish from the nonsense. Pretty good at it. Not perfect, but I would say I got more wins than I got losses. And I went to bed last night going like, oh, I don't know. This doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. Rumor has it from down in the South that they want to make a decision by Friday. And tip of the cap to my wife, who's very, very much smarter than me, who threw out this, you think Nick Saban will retire without a plan? And I'm like, nope. I don't think so. So I don't know if there was a plan in place. I don't know if Nick Saban, because obviously he wasn't going to retire before the national title game. Nick Saban's not an egomaniac that is going to try to take away the shine of a national title game in college football. So that's why he probably waited until Wednesday of this week. So 2 days after the national title game, give Michigan their and I was like, but do you think Nick Saban's going to retire without some sort of a plan? Do you think him and athletic director Greg Byrne didn't sit down and was like, all right, we need this to be as seamless as possible? I don't think there's going to be some long, drawn-out coaching search down at Alabama. And then, of course, there are rumors and reports that maybe potentially Dan Lanning was in Tuscaloosa yesterday. Some of those reports have been refuted by some players. This whole thing is nuts. This whole thing is nuts. That's how I went to bed. Then I woke up. Bill Belichick's leaving the New England Patriots. Oh, my goodness. Oh, boy. Brenden, I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, it was a crazy day yesterday.
Never seen anything like it.
It's a crazy day yesterday.
And this morning, I mean, if you count overnight, too, with Belichick thing. Any one of those stories is the biggest story we have had probably in the last month. Maybe. I mean.
The other name to keep an eye on here, Justin, and, we've said it for a long time, and it's something that I think timing is everything on this. So, do I agree that Dan Lanning would be a great fit in Alabama? Absolutely. But the timing feels off to me. For me, Justin, if I'm Alabama, I'm looking right up the road, Clemson, South Carolina, and another alumni that we have from, and Dabo Swinney is the second highest paid coach in football, only behind Nick Saban.
Hey, so here's the problem with Dabo, and Dabo's name's been thrown out there a lot. First off, let's talk about it financially. I believe Dabo's buyout is around $60 million. Now, would Alabama, if they believe he is the guy, would Alabama be like, yep, sure? Brenden, if this was 2019, I'd be 100% with you. I'm like, this is a done deal. Dabo's leaving Clemson. He's going to Bama. He's an alum. He is, in 2019, he was easily the second best coach in college football behind Nick Saban, in my opinion. And Kirby Smart has since hopped up. Sarkisian, he might be like Dabo's refusal to embrace NIL and embrace the transfer portal, I think ultimately cost him this job. If he even wanted it.
Well,
I think he's a non-starter.
Yeah, and
also a bunch of Alabama fans went to the Nick Saban statue and started chanting anyone but Dabo.
Did you see that they in Auburn they rolled Toomer's corner?
They sure did.
That was kind of cool.
Well, I mean, that is their ding dong the witch is dead moment in Auburn. I mean, it's like Auburn had it was a rivalry, and then Saban showed up. I was like, it's not a rivalry.
Well, and listen to this, Justin. I actually did not know this. I knew about the big buyout, but there's actually another O. Henry twist with a Dabo's buyout. Specifically, there is a 1.5 times multiplier if he goes to Alabama specifically.
Yeah.
It'd be $90 million.
$90 million.
That ain't happening.
Dabo's gone. That ain't happening.
Never mind. 60, tolerable. 90, no.
Now, maybe they've got somebody else in place there. Maybe they've got, like I said.
No one on staff.
My wife's very, very smart. And she was like, Nick Saban's not retiring without a plan. He's not going to throw a surprise. Like, that's not in his makeup. And the entire time he has coached in college football, you think Nick Saban's ever gone in somewhere with that? He talks about it all the time. It's about the process, what you do, the way you go about your business. You think Nick Saban just went to bed and was like, Miss Terry, I think it's time to call it quits. I'm going to hang up my whistle tomorrow. Hey, Greg, I'm out. And they're just not going to have a plan. This has been orchestrated probably since they beat Georgia.
So
if I had to guess.
Do you think this is just because of Saban's legacy? And obviously Saban's probably a tied for life, but go back in his coaching career, he didn't give two bleeps what LSU did after he took off and went to Miami, right?
Yeah.
Not like he sat there and was like, well, does Nick Saban have a plan for LSU now? And it's like, I think he cares about Alabama, but at the same token, Justin, is this not yeah, I did all this for you guys. I left the door and the cupboard stocked. It's up to you to go find somebody. I'm done.
But I think he left LSU, and we're going to end on that. We're going to keep talking about this, though.
They hired Les Miles? That was not bad.
Yeah,
it's not bad.
But he left LSU to take the job with the Miami Dolphins, right? He left the Miami Dolphins to take the job with Alabama. This was not retirement's not a job. You know what I mean? Retirement's a decision. And so that's why I don't think Saban would have sprung it on them without some sort of plan in place. Is that plan Dan Lanning? Is that plan Lane Kiffin? Is that plan Kalen DeBoer? We'll talk about all that, the potential roller coaster, or no, the carousel. I'm on an emotional roller coaster. It's a coaching carousel. And the dominoes that may fall. Because the best job in college football just got open. And the greatest college football coach of all time is now heading out to pasture. And what does that mean down the road? We'll talk about that next. 620 Rip City Radio. All right, yesterday during the show, Pete Carroll, Nick Saban, and Bill Belichick all had coaching jobs. They do not. They do not as we speak right now. Three absolute legends. They are now, retired, mutually parting of the ways, administrative. I don't know, but either way, I know that in Tuscaloosa, in Seattle, and in Foxborough, there's going to be a new vision for the Patriots, the Seahawks, and the Alabama Crimson Tide trolling the sidelines. And we got a lot to dive into. But first and foremost, because, well, it's Rip City Mornings with Justin Myers. You guys know I'm an Oregon football obsessed person. This has a trickle down effect. Because if you look at the Vegas odds, Dan Lanning is the odds-on favorite right now to be the next head coach at Alabama. So we're going to dive into all the woulda, coulda, shoulda for Dan Lanning. The positives, the negatives, the good, the bad, the ugly. Here's the other thing that we have on the show. Brenden has a button over there. We have 1 for happy, 2 for sad. If, in fact, between now and we wrap up the RCM mailbag, if there is news, credible news, not my cousin's best friend's trainer who knows someone in the athletic department, credible news on whether Dan Lanning is staying or leaving, we have a happy button, which will be for me. And I will do a dance, a jig. You can watch it on YouTube. And there will be a sad button. And we may have to find a sponge to wipe up my tears because this can't possibly happen again. This can't possibly happen again.
Now, Justin, I'll say this, and let's not kid ourselves because we know how things go. If there were to be something today, it would be at 9:05. That's just how it works. That's you and me, man.
I'll tell you what right now, and I don't know if I should even say this. If I'm still in the building, and I love Rich Eisen. I think Rich Eisen is a tremendous talk show host. I think he is a tremendous studio host. He has been on this show before. Tremendously nice person. I love Rich Eisen. If I'm still in the building and there's Dan Lanning news, I'm hopping back in this studio. I'm doing it. I will. I'll do it. So we have a happy button. We got a sad button. Now, as I've learned in my life, let's talk it out, all right? Let's put all the options out there on the table. First things first, right? From a coaching standpoint. Does any job get better than Alabama right now? Now, what does it mean? What does a good job in college football mean? We talk about this all the time, right? This is a top 5 job. This is a top 10 job. What are the best jobs in all of college football, right? To me, first and foremost, can you win a national title, right? Because there are just some jobs, I'm sorry, you're not going to win a national title. You might do some great things, and you might get some upsets, and you might build up a program, you might galvanize a fan base, and you might put yourself in a position to have a very comfortable life. But there are just certain spots in college. There's too many teams. The money is not equal. It is an uneven playing field. And there are just certain spots where you can't win a national title. Or if you do, it's going to take a decade or more. All right, so the answer to question 1, can you win a national title? Clearly, yes. I don't know if there is a place right now positioned better than Alabama to win a national title moving forward. I would say maybe Georgia, maybe Michigan. Michigan's the defending champions. Georgia, I believe right now, is the odds-on favorite to win the national title next year. I mean, Georgia's lost 1 game in 3 years. So, maybe Georgia, but in terms of can you win a national title? Yeah, you can at Alabama. Now, second phase of this. Financially beneficial. You betcha. I don't believe there is a job in football. Forget college. I said football. That if Alabama didn't want to match or do better, that they could. There's a reason why Nick Saban's the head coach at Alabama, because he was at Miami in the NFL. And by the way, everybody's like, oh, I failed NFL coach. He was okay in Miami, right? You look at all the leeway we gave Brandon Staley for all the, you go look at Nick Saban's first couple of years, and again, a butterfly effect coaching decision or an organizational decision where he wanted Drew Brees. He thought he was getting Drew Brees to be his quarterback when he took the job, and the Miami Dolphins we can't clear him. He can't clear a physical, he can't pass a physical. You get Dante Culpepper, and it was this isn't going to work. I think they were 10-6, weren't they 10-6? Something like either way. It was clear that Nick Saban went into the NFL and learned the lesson that some coaches thrive on and some coaches just can't handle, which is
9-7 and 6-10.
Yeah, 9-7, not bad for first year. But Nick Saban learned what a lot of coaches from college going into the NFL, and Nick Saban was the defensive coordinator for the Browns, right? It wasn't like he was completely unfamiliar with the NFL, but he learned real fast. You are the cook. You do not buy the ingredients. And I don't know if it ever sat all that well with him. Do you know what I mean? It's here is your pantry. You need to make a gourmet meal. But do we have this? No, we don't have that. We have this. It's close, but it's a little cheaper. And you got to find a way to make that better. And I think that was one of the biggest reasons why he left, which was I am not in control of my players because financially we can afford this, can't afford that. I'll just go back to college where I get all the good players. Nobody's going to out-recruit me. And on top of that, if you remember, I believe at the time, which again kind of goes to show the difference in what college football has done just in the last 17 years when he started, at the time, Alabama was offering him $5 million a year, which was astronomical. Because Alabama was not what we know it now. It was Bear Bryant, sure. It was Roll Tide Roll, sure. But it was not the wagon that Nick Saban built there in Tuscaloosa. It was not, Goliath or, the Death Star, whatever you want to call it. Alabama, I think, was coming off of a 6-6 season. So it was built up, and with those last 17 years, including what? From 2009, they won the first championship, to basically, I think I saw somewhere, Brenden, from 2009 to this year, or maybe it was last year, Alabama at one point in the season was ranked number 1 in the AP poll. Never happened before. The amount of times, the amount of seasons that Alabama's been ranked number 1 in the AP poll is it's an astronomical number. I don't think it's ever, ever, ever going to be matched again. So Saban built it up. And you know what else they've been doing when you go to all those championships? And you win at that high level, you print money. You print money. Boosters are fat and happy because the amount of donations that continue to come in and the amount of money you can charge for tickets, for access, for all that, for suites, and everybody wants to keep up with the Joneses and everybody wants to be. Yeah, he built a financial and competitive wagon. So financially, there's no team in football that can compete with the Alabama Crimson Tide right now, in my opinion. Can you win? Competitive? Yeah. Now here's where Oregon might have a shot. Because this is the third thing that some coaches understand and some coaches blindly ignore. Quality of life. What's your life like? Because that's a spot. You think it's a microscope? You think it is, you think you got a spotlight on you? You think you've got a burden on you? You're about to replace Nick Saban. And it is national championship or bust. Now, a lot of schools say national championship or bust, but they don't mean it. Right? Oregon might say, oh boy. Kalen DeBoer just lost, or Dan Lanning lost to Kalen DeBoer 3 times in a row. You think if you lose to Auburn 3 times in a row at Alabama, that there's going to be people clamoring for you to please stay? Doesn't matter if you win all the rest of your games. You think if you lose 3 games to Auburn in a row, one of which is at a championship level? You think there's going to be people clamoring for you to say, no. It's a different world. Now, Dan Lanning understands that world, lived that world, as we mentioned. He was at Georgia and he was at Alabama. He lived that world. Is that enough to get him to stay? Here's the other thing. While I am not going to sit here and be delusional to tell you that Oregon is in a better chance to win a national title than Alabama. That is delusional. I don't believe that that's true. But with the realignment in college football, and with Oregon and Washington, along with USC and UCLA, going to the Big Ten next year, changes to the college football playoff, the championship possibility in Eugene and Seattle and Los Angeles is probably more wide open than it's ever been. The opportunities are there. If the Pac-12 survived, I'd be like, there's no chance Dan Lanning's going or Dan Lanning's staying. If the Pac-12 survived and it was like, backfilled with some Mountain West teams, it was like Dan Lanning's gone. He's going to Alabama. But the fact that Oregon and all the other schools are going to the Big Ten, you can probably go 9-3 and still make the college football playoff next year. That's the number I've kind of got in my head. There's going to be a team. There's going to be a team that is 9-3 that is going to make the college football playoff next year, I believe. And once you get in, and then it's just about, are you healthy? Can you get hot, right? We wrote off the Buffalo Bills how many weeks ago? They're a 10-point favorite against my beloved Steelers, right?
I didn't.
You did not. I think in our tiers, I said, did the Buffalo Bills stink? And they don't. Turns out they don't.
Yeah, Josh Allen can turn the ball over and they can still win. That's that. I mean,
they're 10-point favorites.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. But yeah, you're totally right.
But I don't like the fact that the college football world is becoming more NFL-ized. But this is going to be a thing where you get healthy at the right time, right? Because you go to a 12-team playoff. You know what you're not going to have? A month-long layoff between conference championships and New Year's Day. You're going to be playing in 2 weeks. That month-long layoff allows for players to get healthy, right? Coaches to game plan. It's why not this year, but in years past, you saw so many blowouts in those semifinal games. So is that enough? Let's just assume that Lanning is Alabama's first choice. Let's just assume that. Is the draw of what you have built at Oregon, the fact that and again, I love Oregon, so I'm obviously coming from a different perspective, but I do think other than maybe pulling you back to your home, there is something to the one school that gave you an opportunity. I do think there is something there. Now, I realize as I say this, Brenden is rolling his eyes because not only was it his alma mater, but it was also the school that gave him his first opportunity. And his head coach a month ago said, thanks, but no thanks. Thanks for the memories, and bailed. So
great Fall Out Boy song.
Thanks for the memories.
Catchy. But yes, you're totally right.
Saw them in concert one time, by the way.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I bet that was fun.
Oh,
man.
yeah.
No, Fall Out
Early
Boy is
years,
solid.
Salem Armory.
Really?
Salem Armory.
How about that?
Fall Out Boy.
We were talking
in concert.
Hey, I love those kind of just stadium concert venues. You and I were talking about some stuff up in Washington and Bend earlier this week. I like those small venues where artists can come in from time to time. But back to your point, yeah. I mean, I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this, Justin, in any respect. Like, it's almost like these three guys, and we'll loop in Belichick and Saban to this conversation. Belichick
Carroll.
and Pete Carroll, this conversation. It's almost like these guys all got together and said, hey, we all going to retire on the same day? All right.
I don't think Pete Carroll retired, though. We're going to talk about that later on in the big show. I do not believe Pete Carroll retired. I think Pete Carroll was told, I know you still want to coach. No. Pretty please? No.
So Seahawk fans maybe know some of the Blazer fans' frustrations now, Justin?
In a different way, we'll find out. Again, be careful what you wish for, because grass ain't always greener. More on that later on in the program. And I do think there is a thing that kind of hangs over this Alabama decision that maybe Dan Lanning has, and maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But I'm just under the impression that he probably has options. Do you want to be the guy that follows Nick Saban? Do you want to be? History probably tells you that's not the best place to be. But as I have said multiple times, if you have never sat down and talked with these coaches, if you do not understand the mentality of these coaches, they don't think like you and I. You and I would be like, stay in Eugene, live a good life. Or if you're Kalen DeBoer, stay in Washington. Dan Lanning kept Oregon not only alive, but thriving after two coaches bounced. That is not forgotten by Oregon fans. Actually, as a matter of fact, that's so much leeway that you can lose to Washington 3 times. We still love you. I don't know if another coach would be able to pull that one off, lose to Washington that many times, and to see them in the national title game. So there's that. But these coaches, the great ones, right? They don't think like, hey, that's going to be too much pressure. That's not how they think. The great coaches never think like, that fan base is too crazy. That's not going to work. They think like, well, clearly I will win there because I've won everywhere. That's Nick Saban never once probably thought, do I want to go to the NFL? I don't know. Yeah, of course I'm going to win there. He didn't, but thought he would. It's the way these coaches think. So how much does the quality of life in Eugene, quality of life in the Pacific Northwest, and the thing that he talked about over and over and over again, because in that quality of life category, right, there's competitiveness, there's financial gain, and then there's quality of life. There is a subcategory in quality of life. Wife and kids. That's a big deal. Dan Lanning mentioned it multiple times. He's lived in 8 states. He's lived in 8. And he hasn't just lived in 8 states where you go and you coach the football program and they take care of all the stuff for you, but your wife and your kids have had to pack up and change schools and then get new friends and 8 states.
It's a bigger deal than you think, Justin.
It's a massive deal.
I know that you in your adult age don't have kids, but I'm sure you can remember when you were young, if your parents came to you and were like, we're moving, like that was like the worst thing ever. It was like when you had to, maybe not so much at high school, but like I remember I had multiple friends in elementary school. Dad got a job somewhere else in the country. They're gone.
Yeah, like devastated. Now imagine doing that 8 times.
I know.
Do that 8 times.
Some stability, and again, I'm no expert on this, but knowing what I know and how many hours a college football coach has to put into building an elite program, Justin, I'm going to guess that maybe in all other aspects of life, your wife and kids probably want some stability. Just a thought. A thought.
And I think, now again, it was one of the worst kept secrets in Eugene that like Mario Cristobal's wife was maybe not the biggest fan of the West Coast, and she's from Miami. It's world
Makes
difference.
Sense.
It's like, meh, go back to Miami. Who knows how the Lanning family is? I root for them. I root for them to love Eugene and love the Pacific Northwest and the Willamette Valley. We got Papa's Pizza down there. Can't leave that. All right. We're going to wrap up hour number 1. Normally we do a round ball. We got a lot of football stuff to talk about today. We're going to make an executive decision because Bill Belichick's not going to be the coach of the New England Patriots anymore. Is he still coaching? Pete Carroll sounded like he still wanted to coach. Either one of those guys is going to be on the sideline next year. We'll talk about that next. 620 Rip City Radio. All right, it's not so beautiful right now. Snow apocalypse is about to become upon us. But you know they always talk about, Brenden, with recruits in the Northwest. You know this with Corvallis, and I know this with Eugene. With football recruits, you got to get them in the summer, right? You get those California boys up in the summer. You get those Texas boys up in the summer. There's nothing better. It's like all this. I remember talking to Michael James one time. I was like, boy, how about this? And he's like, yeah, this is the best. It's not 100 degrees and it's not humid. Like, I can breathe out there at practice. You get those guys up in the summertime. Oh, boy. That's how you recruit them. That's how you recruit the California kids and the Texas kids and the Arizona kids, right? You get them up in the summertime in the Willamette Valley. You bring them in the winter. Because I remember transfer portal happened. Bo Nix came in, and Bo Nix was like, this is really cold. Like, it's cold. It's really rainy. Dan Lanning's seen enough Oregon summer, right? To where he knows that what's going on right now. I hope he's not in Tuscaloosa. Some people reported Dan Lanning's in Tuscaloosa. I don't know if that's true. It's a bold move to throw it on TV, though. We'll say that. Bold move. Sports reporter in Eugene, throw it out on TV. I got sources. Like, okay, let's find out. Because if you don't, I know how Oregon fans work. I am one. It's not going to go well for you. That's all I'm going to say. So I've always said multiple times, I have opinions on this show. I don't have sources. The sources don't tell me anything. I have opinions on this show. But it is time to wrap up hour number one, as we talked about. What a crazy day in the coaching world. More on the Nick Saban legacy. More on the potential Dan Lanning. Is Kalen DeBoer going to be in that mix as well? Is Lane Kiffin going to hippity hop? Is he going to have a third SEC team under his belt? Could you imagine if Lane Kiffin gets that job in Tuscaloosa? Lane Kiffin would have been the head coach of the Raiders. Forget about that. He was. The Raiders, the USC Trojans, the Tennessee Volunteers, the Ole Miss Rebels, and then the Alabama Crimson Tide. Could you, that's a lot of big-time brands, is all I'm saying. A lot of big-time brands that old Lane Kiffin potentially could be the head coach of. But obviously the NFL has got 2 more spots open. So now add the Patriots and the Seahawks to teams that are going to be looking for and will be hiring new head coaches. And it's interesting. Belichick was the oldest coach in the NFL. And you look at the last couple of years, and especially this year, magic wasn't there. Was it because he doesn't have Tom Brady at quarterback? I kind of think so, but that's still Bill Belichick. That's a lot of Super Bowl rings with that guy. And then you got Pete Carroll with the Seattle Seahawks. And if you watched his press conference yesterday, did not sound like a guy that was ready to be done. So we talked about, if you're the Los Angeles Chargers, Belichick now available. Harbaugh's always available, right? Jim Harbaugh's always available. You know, Brenden, Pete Carroll had a pretty good run in Los Angeles there at the Coliseum with the USC Trojans. A lot of people in L.A. really love Pete Carroll. If you are the Los Angeles Chargers, you give old Coach Carroll a call? I'm biased because I love Pete Carroll. I love him.
So his style of play, to me, and this is just my opinion, it does not reflect the style of play you need to play with Justin Herbert. Pete Carroll.
See, I think the opposite, but finish your point.
Yeah, no, I think you need somebody who's going to come in and do what Justin Herbert's meant to do. Throw the ball 30, 40 times a game and be a mini Mahomes. Like, he has the ability to run a dynamic offense, and I think that that's what Herbert needs, as opposed to a coach who would say, hey, we're going to run the ball an awful lot like Pete, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can win games that way. We saw him win games, but, like, I get Russ was great, but, like, the ceiling of what Herbert can offer you versus the ceiling of what Russell Wilson could offer you, I think Herbert's is higher. As crazy as that sounds.
All right, a couple things on that. And your opinion is valid. Here's why I would disagree a little bit. I think the reason that Pete Carroll didn't let Russ cook is because when Russ cooked, he turned the ball over. And then he had Geno Smith for 2 years, who was accurate, sure, but was not dynamic. I think you get the right offensive coordinator, and maybe even Kellen Moore's the guy. Maybe Kellen Moore sticks around. I don't know. But if you go and you hire Pete Carroll, shore up the defense around a generational talent, and obviously I'm biased with Herbie, but around a generational like physical ability, like that he's 6'6", rocket arm. I don't know. I think that's the kind of matchup you want. I don't know. But you're right in terms of like Pete Carroll's always kind of been a conservative guy, but was that because that's his style? Or was that because when he let Russ cook, he turned the ball over a lot and they weren't winning games? And when they were playing and giving Marshawn Lynch the ball, they seemed to win a lot of games. And their defense was so good.
That's a good point. I mean, college football was very different, but I think go back and look at Matt Leinert's stats. Matt Leinart was great, never threw for more than like 2,600 yards, 2,700 yards in a season because they were running the ball with Reggie and Lendale so much.
Yeah, well.
Which you would.
You have the greatest college football player of all time in your backfield.
Probably the best running back duo, to be honest, maybe of all time. But that's kind of my thought there is I think they need somebody.
I think there was a time Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders were both at Oklahoma State.
Okay, that's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
Probably pretty good, too. But, yeah, it's up there. But, no, I think that's my thought. But who knows? I still think Belichick would be a great fit with the Chargers.
But isn't he the same way like as Pete Carroll? He's a defensive-minded coach, and we're on to Cincinnati. And
yeah, no, there could be. I think back to, like, Belichick got the best out of Brady, right? So
or Brady got
best about either or.
You know my thoughts on this. And maybe I'm overthinking it because I obviously go to college football. Like Pete Carroll's Hollywood, baby. He's Hollywood.
He could do it again.
Bill Belichick, we're on to Cincinnati.
That's a really good point. I'll give you that.
Pete Carroll's Hollywood, baby. All right.
He going to get Snoop Dogg on the sidelines again?
Why not?
Run it back, baby.
We've got a whole second hour coming up. We've got, what do we got? Make or Miss coming up as well. All sorts of fun stuff next, 620 Rip City Radio.
And here's what you need to know. From the Goldberg-Jones Sports Desk, your 620 Rip City Radio headlines. Goldberg-Jones. Call 1-800-DIVORCE.
It is 7 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Justin Myers with you. The biggest shakeup in football coaching history happened in the last 24 hours. Pete Carroll will be moving to an administrative role with the Seattle Seahawks after a 14-year run with the franchise, 2 Super Bowl appearances, and a Super Bowl win for Seattle. Nick Saban is retired from Alabama after 17 seasons in Tuscaloosa, including 6 national championships. He retires from college football. And then early this morning, it was reported by ESPN that Bill Belichick is expected to be out in New England with a mutual parting of the ways. We got a Super Wildcard weekend coming up on Saturday. Dan Pizzuta, who covers the NFL, is going to be joining us to break down the matchups. Crazy weather in Kansas City and in Buffalo. But the coaching carousel is as nuts as it's ever been, and obviously a lot of nervousness a couple hours south of us, and, well, right here in this particular room. Hour 2 of RCM starts right now on 620 Rip City Radio.
The home of the OSAA is 620 Rip City Radio.
All right, welcome back to RCM. I'm your host, Justin Myers. You can, of course, watch us on the YouTube. Just a preface, a warning, a disclaimer. I've been fighting this congestion. I've been dealing with this, gunk from about my nose to my eyeballs for like a couple of weeks now. So if you're watching YouTube and you catch me, what do they call it? Digging for gold? Just give me a little bit of a pass, all right? I'm trying to be mindful of it, but, it's going to happen. Let's just say there's a lot going on the old schnoz, if you know what I mean. But we appreciate you hanging out with us, however you are doing so, whether you're listening on the old school radio, whether you're listening on the app, whether you are listening on the podcast, and it is like into the future. The future? Maybe we know, as you are listening right now, in the future, what is ultimately going to happen with Alabama. Is it Dan Lanning? Is Kalen DeBoer going to be a sneaky candidate? Is it going to be Lane Kiffin? We got a lot of stuff to dive into on the show. But we are going to have a make or miss coming up in 20 minutes. But a lot of football talk on the big show today. Plus, Blazers back in action. They'll be taking on Oklahoma City. Can they get back on the right track? They've lost 4 of their last 5, I think. Somewhere around there. And Oklahoma City's really good. So we'll find out about the Blazers later on tonight. But the football world, shocked as Foxborough to Seattle to Tuscaloosa will all have new coaches roaming the sidelines. And obviously, there will be a trickle-down effect. The Pacific Northwest is massively affected because Pete Carroll, it was announced yesterday afternoon that he will be moving to an administrative role, a mutual parting of the ways and an administrative role. But if you listen to old Pete Carroll's press conference, didn't sound like a guy that was ready to be done coaching. Didn't sound like a guy who wanted to be put out to pasture. Didn't want to be chained to a desk, right? I'll have you riding that pine, detective. That's what they always do on the cop shows, right? You take it too far. McGinty, have you chained to a desk? Well, Pete Carroll didn't feel like a guy who wanted to be chained to a desk, but it sounded like, and he said, I competed. Now, you got to understand, Pete Carroll's thing is competition, right? He wrote a book. It was called Compete Every Day. Like, that's Pete Carroll's thing, is competition. So it was not a surprise at the press conference when he said, yeah, I competed. I didn't want to give up the job. Now, maybe ultimately clearer heads prevailed, but what it sounded like, if I'm reading between the lines, sounds like the Seahawks tried to pull a little do-si-do yesterday, getting out in front of the press conference with the press release saying it was a mutual part. This is, he's moving to an administrative role. It sounded like, oh, kumbaya. Pete Carroll's in his 70s. He's been coaching the NFL for 14 years. He managed to keep the organization afloat when Russell Wilson took off and essentially said, yeah, you can give me the biggest contract in NFL history. I ain't signing it. I'm leaving. That's what Russell Wilson did. Pete Carroll didn't kick Russell Wilson out of Seattle. Russ bailed. And Pete Carroll was there. Was like, all right, we're going to find a way to win with Geno. They did. Went to the playoffs. We're still going to find a way to win with Geno. Winning season this year, but fell just short of the postseason. And it feels like up in Seattle, whether it is Jody Allen, whom we are very familiar with here, whether it is Jody Allen, whether it was John Schneider, or maybe it was somebody, parts in between, that it felt like needs some new leadership, needs some new vision, new voice on the sideline, and the time has come to make that move. And so let's focus in on the Seahawk thing real quick. First off, first name popped into my head, Dan Quinn. So Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator who orchestrated that 2013 run for the Seahawks with Earl Thomas and with Richard Sherman and with Cam Chancellor and with Bobby Wagner. One of the best defensive teams in NFL history. I mean, you look at the statistics that the Legion of Boom and everything that they built there. Dan Quinn, defensive coordinator, he was one of the architects. Dan Quinn would then go on to become the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I don't know if it was Dan Quinn's idea or if it was Kyle Shanahan's idea, but if they kick a field goal in a Super Bowl about 6 years ago, Dan Quinn's Super Bowl champion head coach. If they kick a field goal.
The Buck, obviously, and this is very similar to Pete Carroll and Darrell Bevel and the whole throw thing.
Yeah.
The Buck always stops with the head coach.
It really does.
But I'll say this, Justin, given that it was such a perfect, arrival of things, Kyle Shanahan was their offensive coordinator for 1 year because everybody knew he was going to get a head coaching job.
Yeah.
So it was and hey, guess what? He's been there ever since. So I think there were some concessions made when Dan Quinn, being a first-time head coach, is you handle the offense, Kyle. I'm defense, offense, that is all you. Do your thing. Now, do they expect to do that thing and lose that way? But go back and look, Justin. And I know people have forgot, that Atlanta Falcons team that year, Matt Ryan was
the MVP.
Cooking.
He was the MVP.
Yeah. They were cooking
Matt
that
Ryan
year.
was the MVP. Like I said, they were in, forget what the score, was it 35 to 10? Was that, or 34 to 10? Wasn't that the thing? Either way.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
They had everything set up. And for some inexplicable reason.
28-3.
28 to 3.
There it is. There it is. I knew it was something
28
obvious.
to 3. But anyways. And again, if ifs and ands were pots and pans, right? It's real easy to sit here in a radio studio as opposed to being there in the Super Bowl. But looking back, it's dude, run the ball 3 times, kick the field goal. Instead, threw the ball, incomplete, took a sack out of field goal range, gave the ball back to Tom Brady, and he had just enough time.
Right, and then
they run the ball, run the clock out, burn some timeouts, kick a field goal. They went for the big win.
Yeah. I mean,
it didn't work out. But anyways, that's how close Dan Quinn was.
Yes.
Who is now the defensive coordinator of the Cowboys, of being a Super Bowl champion head coach. And obviously he was the architect of the Legion of Boom.
Let me ask you this, though. If Dan Quinn wins, and this is what I think is very interesting, because he had that, and then the Super Bowl hangover hit the Falcons so hard. You knew they were never going to be able to live off, live
and then
out.
Matt Ryan got hurt.
Right. Live out the 28-3. They heard it so long, but Justin, he wins that. He's probably still coaching in Atlanta, no?
Potentially.
One Super Bowl? I don't think they have any.
They do not have any. No,
go.
They've only appeared in, I believe, 2.
There you go.
So, yeah. I don't know if he's still there, but either way, he's a head coach somewhere. He's not a coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. But that's a name that I'm sure.
First name, Justin texted me.
I was like, dude,
right away, he knew.
Because here's the thing. I text you before the press conference, right? And I saw the press release, and I'm like, just like I thought with Nick Saban, there's a plan in place here. Pete knows Dan Quinn. John Schneider knows Dan Quinn. Ownership knows Dan Quinn. Maybe they know something that I don't know that is hey, Pete, you move into the front office. We'll bring Dan in. Everything else kind of remains the same. Obviously, there will be some turnover with the assistant coaches, but it could be as seamless of a Didn't seem like that after the press conference. So, I'm curious what direction the Seahawks are going to go. Do they go defense? Do they go with Dan Quinn? Do they try to find the next hot shot? I know that Mike McDaniel calls the plays in Miami. Who's their offensive coordinator? I'm trying to think of best offensive coordinators in the NFL right now. Interesting name. I wonder if it's going to get thrown out is Eric Bieniemy, maybe potentially going to be on their list.
Frank Smith is the offensive coordinator for
what a name.
The Dolphins. He is 42 years old, so very young. Basically been.
So I would if I were to create a short list for the Seahawks, I would put Dan Quinn on the short list. I would put Eric Bieniemy on the short list.
Do you kick the tires on Vrabel at all?
I think Vrabel's going to New England, right?
Yeah, I just thought that's the thing. I think Mike Vrabel's a decent head coach. I just think he ran out of gas in Tennessee with personnel and some other things. Mm-hmm. But you could be right there.
But Vrabel's a little he's a little like Pete Carroll. I want to run the ball.
He is.
Control the clock. Now maybe the team's built that way. I don't know. Now you got to remember, John Schneider also had ties in Green Bay. Maybe there's something I don't know. So it's going to be interesting to see who the Seahawks go after. Did the Seahawks go after a college coach?
Who would be in that mix? Just some names. They wouldn't go for
Lincoln
Urban.
Riley?
Urban wouldn't fit.
Lincoln Riley? There you go. I mean,
take another USC coach. I mean, it's worked
that's
before.
what I'm saying. I don't know.
Would Lincoln take that job?
That's a very good question. Yeah. That's a good question for Lincoln Riley, right? Does Lincoln Riley want to be the USC coach, probably for the next 8-9 years in the Big Ten, or does he have those NFL aspirations? Remember, we talked to Cam Miller earlier this week, and I was like, other than Harbaugh, and again, talk about your all-time grudge. Remember, Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh do not like each other. Remember, this went back to 2006. Stanford USC beef. Pete Carroll going, "What's your deal, man?" Because they were blowing USC out, and Jim Harbaugh went for 2, and he did the whole because I couldn't go for 3, right? Because he's a Michigan guy, loves Bo Schembechler and all that stuff. And then it was the 49ers and the Seahawks, and they battled it out in the NFC Championship game, ultimately giving Pete Carroll and the Seahawks the win, going to the Super Bowl, right? Did Jim Harbaugh kick the tires on the Seattle Seahawks? Would the Seahawks fan base embrace Jim Harbaugh? A guy they hated. I was there. I was there when Harbaugh was in the 49ers. They hated him.
Would that be about money, or is that about Jim's desire to chase the highest Lombardi? Because as I look at it on its merits, again, the Allens do have access to Paul Allen's massive estate and all the wealth that comes with it.
Poor turtles.
But Michigan, Justin, they could put up a financial fight with anybody. Right?
I agree. If there was a coach in the world who would take a job just to troll another guy, it'd be Jim Harbaugh. I don't think he's going to do it. I don't think he will. But if I came to you, Brenden, and I go, hey, name a coach that would take a job simply out of spite. Name one coach in America who could have a job at either the NFL or the college football level who would take a job solely out of spite. Jim Harbaugh's at the top of that list. Top of that list.
If you're Seattle, would it be crazy? And again, this is college football coaches. Crazy to look at Kalen DeBoer? Take him to the next level?
That's another thing I saw yesterday.
That's probably crazy. That's probably crazy. I'll say that.
But it is.
He's right there.
Is it crazy?
A coach with 4 years collegiate experience. I mean,
coaches have had less.
Or Division I coaching experience. I
understand that,
but yeah, I mean, do you look at Kalen DeBoer and say, "Hey, you want to come over to the clink?"
It's clear he knows how to run NFL offense. Clear. I don't think they do, but what would the people of Seattle think? Boy, talk about your all-time I don't know how to feel about this, but. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what the Seahawks do. I personally, and again, we'll see how it plays out. Right, that's everything in the sports world. I think this is a mistake. I do. I think it's a mistake. This guy, you had a winning record. Right? You are a bad coach away from being the Sea Chickens again. Right? Don't think it can't happen.
Them's fighting words of the 12s, Justin.
I understand, but the 12s were barely 7s, before Pete Carroll got there. Oh, yeah, we had a run with Mike Holmgren. I get it. But I remember a lot of empty stadiums. A lot of empty kingdoms.
So you're saying back then they didn't have, like, Chris Pratt hoisting the flag?
There was no flag. There was no flag in the Kingdome, all right? There's a lot. And then they played at Husky Stadium when they were building what would now become Lumen Field. A lot of it, they were giving away free tickets. It wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't like buy a Whopper and get a ticket, was it?
I think it was just come to the stadium. We'll find you a seat.
Because I've heard that story in the old days, like when schools were bad, it'd be like, oh, yeah, you go to Burger King and get a ticket to the game for free kind of a thing.
100%.
Which is nuts. But, yeah, it is so fascinating. It's kind of funny as we look at it, Justin, maybe because we're West Coast folks. But in this instance, it's like, for me, it's crazy that, like, Belichick is the third most important coaching change in my ranking. Like, it goes Pete Carroll, Saban, and then it's just
because
nuts.
I think, and we'll close on this, I've been thinking for the last 2 months, Belichick's done in New England, right? I don't think he wants to be there anymore. I don't think Robert Kraft wanted him to be there. I think it was like, hey, we had a good run, but now it's time to move on, to move forward. We need some new blood in here. And I thought Belichick's like, I'm going to go to sunny California. I still think he's the leading candidate for the Chargers. We'll find out. I did not see Pete Carroll getting fired yesterday. And I certainly
me neither.
And I certainly didn't see Nick Saban stepping down. And of course, those two things vastly affect football fandom in the Pacific Northwest. All right, coming up next, we have got Make or Miss here on 620 Rip City Radio. Might be -2 in Kansas
No
City.
thanks.
-2.
Yeah, I don't do that.
And here comes the Miami Dolphins.
It's tough. But the Chiefs have not been playing good football. So
Yeah, don't you think -2?
yeah,
Let's
that's a
just let that settle in real. What's the coldest you've ever been? Like actual temperature. I've been -4, and it was not pleasant.
I want to say like 0. Some hunting trips as a kid going into the mountains and whatnot, like some zeros,
Yeah.
maybe some negatives.
I was outside coaching high school football.
Yeah, no, not that.
-4.
No, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was brutal. So -2 in Kansas City. 40-mile-an-hour winds in Buffalo, by the way.
Also sounds just horrible.
Not for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, the Bills Mafia probably loves it.
Not for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's grind it out. Let's just play some rugby. See if we can keep it close. But
Notice how Buffalo's, their new stadium, Justin's going to be indoor. Just would like that to be on the record. So they clearly see it as a problem, too.
Well, wasn't it last year they had to move that game to Detroit because they got literally 5 feet of snow.
Yes,
and they were
I remember that.
we do not trust our fans to not go to the game and not drink 11 beers and then drive home in
remember
that.
that.
So we're going to go to Detroit. That's where
I mean, Detroit was a non-factor last year, so can't do that this year.
Yeah, they were right down to the wire, though, I thought. They were 500 or
Were they? Okay, so not.
Remember they beat the Packers. They needed help, and then they lost the help,
That's
but they still
right.
beat the Packers. But, yeah.
That's true. That's a good point.
But, yeah, the Bills had some interesting story. Did you see, speaking of Detroit, I think, now this may be fake news on the internet, which in my world with Dan Lanning, boy, there's been a lot of stuff on the internet that has been coming my way. But I think I saw that the Detroit Lions were banning Matt Stafford jerseys. Like old Detroit Lion Matt Stafford jerseys. They were like don't wear them to the stadium. Now, I don't know if it was more of a campaign of hey, wear something else, or if it's an actual, because they do that sometimes with if the GM is unpopular, they won't let you hold a sign that says I very much remember the Fire Witsit days around here.
Okay, so it's taken some legs from what it was, Justin. It was the top Detroit sports bar said don't show up wearing Stafford.
So it's not the Detroit Lions didn't say you will not be allowed into the stadium with a Matthew Stafford jersey.
I think that's again not gonna.
The internet's got me a couple times.
I'm just gonna take a shot here, Justin. And again, given that it's not something offensive, it's probably discriminatory to tell people what they can and can't wear.
Well, it's your stadium though.
Yes.
It's your stadium.
But, if I went to a Blazer game and was wearing a Dame jersey, I don't think they could do. I don't think that's legal. Maybe I'm wrong.
James Dolan, he kicked everybody out of Madison Square Garden.
That's true. It is your private arena, I guess.
Not for what they're wearing, if they're
it.
just mean to him. They're just yeah, you're out. This is my stadium.
This is where you have to learn, is Ford Field a public entity, Justin, or does the Ford family own Ford Field?
I don't know.
Exactly.
But
so if it's the city that owns it, well, then you're denying the people their
right.
rights.
So that was the internet hoax. Because the thing I saw was they're banning Matthew Stafford jerseys. They're no, just don't wear the Matthew Stafford jerseys. But that's going to be a fascinating game as well. So all that being said, Dan Pizzuta joins the show. Right now, though, let's dive into Make or Miss.
It bounces off the crossbar, and it's good! Oh, my goodness! Oh, and a big miss.
It's Make or Miss here on RCM.
Also, Justin, last point on that.
Yeah.
Of course, quick Google. Matthew Stafford's wife, of course, had a comment on this, too.
That's what I saw.
She has a comment on everything. She said it was sad. Said sad that they can't wear their jerseys. So, be that as it may. All that aside, let's go ahead and open up Make or Miss. We're going to start with a spicy one today, Justin. Paul Allen would have never done this to Pete.
Ooh. It's a good question. I don't think it happens if Paul Allen's still with us. I think Pete Carroll's still the head coach. Because let's go back and let's talk about what has happened the last 3 years, right? Russell Wilson got hurt, had the finger injury. Geno Smith came in, had some struggles, but Seahawks missed the playoffs. And a good chunk of it was because of it. Your quarterback was hurt for 5 weeks. There were rumblings already before that with regard to Russell Wilson's happiness or gruntledness. He was not extremely gruntled. He was disgruntled. And so then it got to the point where finally Russell Wilson said, guys, I'm out. I'm out. I don't want to play for this team anymore. And my contract's coming up. I am not signing it. I will play the last year. If you don't trade me, you could offer me the most amount of money anybody's ever been paid. I won't sign it. I will leave as a free agent. So the Seahawks had to move. They had to trade him. This was not a Pete Carroll or Russell Wilson. You got to choose one. Wasn't one of those kind of ultimatums. Russell Wilson said, I'm leaving. I am out. Trade me to one of these teams. And they said, no. But you'll go to the Broncos. And Pete Carroll said, all right, we're going to find a way to win with Geno Smith. And they did. And they made the playoffs. And then they had a winning record this year. How many other coaches who could lose a franchise quarterback in the way that the Seahawks lost a franchise quarterback could continue? Look at what the Packers, now the Packers are back in the postseason. And good for Brenden, or for Matt LaFleur. They're back in the postseason. But Packers after Aaron Rodgers. Now, I'm not saying that Russell Wilson's better than Aaron Rodgers. That's silly. But look at the Patriots after Brady. The Packers, it took them a couple of years. And now Jordan Love's got him in the postseason. So maybe that's a bad analogy, the Packers.
I think it's better to look like, again, Bill Belichick couldn't do what Pete Carroll did. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm just going to be objectively honest. Could Mac Jones / Cam Newton have done better than they did? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think if you had switched the situations and you'd given Pete Carroll, Cam Newton, Mac Jones, he goes to the playoffs one of those years. So that's not to say that Pete Carroll is a better coach.
They went to the playoffs with Mac Jones, right?
They did.
1 year.
1 year. And that's not to say that I think you're splitting hairs. I mean, obviously one has 6 rings and one has 1, but one also has a couple college rings. You're splitting hairs between who's the better coach. They both have had their moments, but I think
this is a mistake by Seattle.
I agree.
I really do. And
so you don't think Paul would have ever done this?
What's that?
You don't think Paul would have ever done this?
I don't think so. No. I think there was clearly a rebuilding type effort going on when you look at their draft picks. They were playing very young on defense. And, I clearly think that Paul Allen would have allowed, hey, let's see if Pete can get us there. Couple more years. Because what's the rush? Lumen Field's still sold out. I don't think there is a clamoring of Seahawk fans who are ready to move on from Pete Carroll. I never got that sense. Maybe some frustration, sure, but hey, things were going in the right direction post Russell Wilson. But now you're really kind of starting over, I think. Because you and I mentioned this at the beginning of, not the beginning of the show, in the pre-show meeting. All right, new coach comes in. Guess what? Geno Smith's gone. If you're Geno Smith, not going to be there. The Seahawks can get out from that contract. I think it's that little window that Brady Henderson told us about a month ago. 5 days after the Super Bowl, Geno Smith's going to be gone. So Seahawks, I believe, are going to be in the running. And for the first time since the early 90s, will potentially be drafting a quarterback in the first round. Or maybe they'll go and find a Gardner Minshew or a Jake Browning. One of these backups that played significant time this year. Those are the only two I can think of who might have earned themselves starting jobs. Probably more Minshew than Browning, but you're going to be going out and finding a quarterback. And so now you're really reloading. Rebuilding.
Maybe this is recency bias and just looking at it, Justin, but now I look at it and I look at this, and let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Now that, again, just calling it as I see it.
Spit it out. We're good.
Since 2019, can you say that the Blazers and Seahawks have been on a positive path since Paul passed away and Jody's taken control as chairwoman?
No, but for two very different reasons. The Seahawk thing, I put all of it on Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson was on a gravy train with biscuit wheels, man. It was Russell and it was Pete, and maybe it wasn't his perfect offense, and maybe he got tired of handing the ball
He didn't
off
have an
too
office, Justin.
He had everything else he wanted. You know what I mean? Like, he had his personal quarterback coach, who's a super nice guy. Jay Gibbs is a nice man. He kind of had everything he wanted, just Pete Carroll just didn't let him cook enough. And he thought, well, I'll just take my show to Denver, and guess what? One coach gets fired, now you're about ready to be released, and grass isn't always greener. Lesson to be learned. So I think for very different reasons. Obviously, the Blazers, there were some other factors, right?
Just look at it and I see.
But like the Seahawks, it's all on Russell Wilson, in my opinion.
Like, to an extent, yes, but I think, like, a part of me is also like, it feels like, and again, feels like it's time, Justin. Like, now.
You think so?
Not for Pete.
Oh.
Like, they've cleaned house in both regards. Sell both the franchises.
Yeah.
I'm so ready for that to happen. They're obviously not. They're obviously going to gear up and hire.
Well, here's the thing that is going to happen. I will tell you right now. Here's the thing that will happen. If you bring in a head coach and that head coach is not as successful as Pete Carroll, right? Pete Carroll he's not Nick Saban and he's not Bill Belichick. I love Pete Carroll, but I can concede easily he's not. Those guys have rings for two hands, right? They need two hands for their rings. Pete needs one because he's got the one. But this is still a 14-year run that no coach in Seattle has ever been on, right? Nothing like this. And I'm not talking about the Seattle Seahawks. I'm talking about the Supersonics. I'm talking about the Mariners. I'm talking about even the Huskies of the late 80s, early 90s. Nothing like the success that Pete Carroll has had. He's the greatest coach in Seattle sports history. And I know some people will like to throw Don James out there, and that's fine. But for my money, he's the best coach in Seattle sports history. Good luck following that in what's probably going to be a rookie quarterback. And then what you will hear is the rumblings that we hear in our beloved Rip City, which is like, aren't they going to sell the team? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just, to me,
if this falls apart, you're going to hear the sell the team rumblings a couple hours north of us.
Yeah,
rather than just right here.
Right, because that has been a conversation, I want to say, for about 2 years now, basically ever since Phil Knight made that offer. Blazer fans have been and again, I'm not sitting here on my pedestal, Justin, saying...
Yeah, fancy stool.
saying that, or standing on my pedestal, that, it needs to happen, but, like, now as I sit here, it's like, okay, the Blazer era from before is now wholly gone.
Yeah.
The Seahawk era from before, now wholly gone. Justin, again, I'm just saying, there might be a guy who wants to purchase these teams. At least one.
At least one that wants to purchase this one in our fair city, and we should let him.
I wholeheartedly
should let him.
Anyway, let's get to another
one. If anything, for the sake of the animals in the ocean.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. It's not even close. Nick Saban is the greatest college football coach to ever live.
Yeah, that's I would say it's close.
Who's in the conversation?
Bobby Bowden. Bobby Bowden's in the conversation because now here's the thing. I have said this about Nick Saban, why I believe he is the best. He won in a bowl era, he won in a BCS era, and he won in a college football playoff era. You go back to Bobby Bowden, if there was a college football playoff, which Nick Saban has benefited from at least 3 times, I believe, of his 6 national championships at Alabama. I think 3 of them were college football playoff. You go back and Florida State had at least 2 games to Miami where they lost by a field goal. Like Florida State would have been in the same situation. So I put Bobby Bowden up there.
Why?
But Nick Saban won it. He got the rings, and winners get sprinkled.
With that, and I mentioned it earlier, I know we talked about it in the pre-show meeting a little bit, like, you could make the same case for Tom Osborne in Nebraska. He's got 3 titles, very well could have played and probably won several more in the 90s. And again, before my time, but Justin, there was a time when people thought Nebraska was Alabama. Now,
100%.
So,
yeah, they were a wagon. Nebraska and Florida State and Miami, that's the 80s and the 90s right there. Texas in the 70s. I think Texas in the 70s. And here's where it gets a little weird. And I know some people may not like that I'm going to bring this up, but it is a reality. I have a hard time evaluating any dynasties in college football pre-integration. Do you know what I mean?
I agree.
Like, it was the late 60s. It was, actually, I think before Alabama actually integrated, I think it was the 70s. Like, sorry. Clearly, we can't evaluate when you're not integrated as a football team. So I just eliminate all of them.
So with that, you take out Bear Bryant.
Bear Bryant's out.
Okay.
Bear Bryant's out.
And I don't disagree.
I'm not saying it was all Bear Bryant's fault that we didn't have racial harmony in the 60s.
Especially in the South.
But I'm saying it's a little easier to win a national championship when the entire SEC is not integrated.
I mean, it's interesting
I'm
because,
just saying it's a little easier to win that way.
Like, let me ask you this. Where's Urban on this list with his 3 national championships in 2 different spots?
He's up there.
Right?
He's up and an undefeated season at Utah.
Right.
You know?
Again, Nick Saban obviously holds the mantle with his 7 championships overall.
I still think, Saban had a run of 15 years.
Yeah.
Bobby Bowden had a run of about 15 years.
Yeah.
Right? That's...
Nebraska's probably the same, if not...
about at least a decade. That's the litmus test here. And then there's Joe Paterno, and that's problematic as well. It just is. Can't deny it.
But he doesn't have more than 1 national...
He has 2.
Does he have 2? Again, that...
One in the 80s. Well, they went undefeated in 94, beat Oregon, but...
He does have 2, you're right. I mean...
and maybe should have 3 because of the 94 season.
Right, and again with
but that's the whole thing.
Right, and for a while, Justin, those wins...
We separate art from artists,
right.
You know?
For a while, those wins didn't count. So how do you look at it? I mean, I know it got, like you said, very, very tough situation to look at his legacy. But
for me, for my money, and obviously the 2, it's Bobby Bowden and it's Nick Saban. I put Nick Saban 1, but kids, Google Bobby Bowden. I think they went 17 years finishing in the top 5. And that's unbelievable.
How many more titles would Dabo or Kirby Smart have to win to get in this conversation? Because both of them have 2.
You gotta win 2 more. You gotta get 4.
4.
You gotta win 2, and that's so hard.
Oh yeah,
it's so hard.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic make or miss. We wrap up hour number 2 coming up next. 620 Rip City Radio. come on, Dan. Baby, one more time. One more time. Come on back. Come on back. Let's make a run of this. We're going to the Big Ten. Got all these recruits back. You got a quarterback. You got 2 quarterbacks for crying out loud. You want to trade all that? Go down to Alabama. We are wrapping up hour number 2 of the big show. You know how I said that at the beginning of the hour about if you were watching on YouTube that this little gunk, this little congestion. I have got like a tickle in my nose. Do you ever get that where you got like a tickle in your nose and you're like, is that a nose hair I need to pluck out of there? Is that a bug I need to go in there and get, or is that just mental? But I've got a tickle in my nose, and I'm being like self-conscious, and I don't know because I know all of you YouTubers are watching, and they're like, watch Justin, he is picking his nose in the middle of his show. Yeah, I got a tickle, so I'm dealing with that. I'm dealing with some emotional roller coaster stuff here with Dan Lanning. Is he going to be going to Alabama? Is this going to possibly be 3? Is it going to be 3 coaches in a row? How many times does Oregon coaches' dream jobs have to keep popping open? What is going on? Is this
Justin? Let's not.
Is this a curse for firing Helfrich? Is this our own fault?
No, but
this is what we get for firing Mark Helfrich.
I mean, really, it's kind of ironic because, like you said, you thought that getting the guy who his alma mater is it William and Jewel or William and Mary? One of the two?
I think it's William Jewell.
Okay, so it's like, you're like, oh, yeah, you got no alma mater. We're set.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
except that maybe the greatest job in the history of college football has opened up, and he's maybe the hottest name of young, recruitable, right, sexy name coaches, right?
In my opinion, there are 3 jobs in America that Dan Lanning would bat an eye for, and that would be Georgia, that would be Alabama, and ironically, and I know this is going to sound crazy, he would listen to USC should that job have ever made open. I could see him really being the two
in the SEC. I would agree with you. I don't know if I would agree on the USC thing, but you know what? You never know. You never know.
Just a thought. I'm not like, oh yeah, totally. But like, you look at him, you look at his kind of swagger, and I think he would be like a Lincoln 2.0. But again, going back to your point, it's like almost 0 to no jobs. So personally, I say it's no better than a coin flip chance. I don't think it's going to happen based on everything that he said, but you never know. I sat here and Justin...
It's so easy to...
Justin told me he thought Jonathan Smith would be coach on Monday.
I did.
Great podcast.
It's easy to sit here and talk about how much you love this job and how you never want to leave while you have no options. You know what I mean? What was it Chris Rock said? Men are as faithful as their options, right? Coaches are as faithful as their options. It just is the way it is in the coaching world. And you can sit here and you can say all the right things about how I've got everything I need here. I don't need anything else. Why wouldn't I be? We heard that one once. Also heard,
no decisions have been made is my favorite.
You also heard no decisions have been made. You also heard in 2018, the year after Willie Taggart left and Mario Cristobal took the job and was like, I'm not going anywhere. This is going to be my last job. I was like, wait, wink, nod, unless Miami opens up, which we all kind of knew. Miami opened up not once but twice when Mario Cristobal, I talk about a tease. It was opened up twice. It's like once, sure, twice, we're done. It's real easy to say all those right things when you don't have a job offer and when you don't have the number and you envision yourself like, all right, are we really saying no? So we're going to find out. Now, here's some good news. Good news from a friend of the program. It was reported, not just on internet message boards, but on local news yesterday down in Eugene. It was reported that according to some reporter sources down in Alabama, that Dan Lanning was actually already in Tuscaloosa. Now, if that were true, that is a doomsday scenario if you're an Oregon fan, which tells me if that were true, that would mean that Nick Saban had this whole process in place, that for the last 2 weeks, or really the last month, who knows, but at least for the last week, if he knew he was contemplating retiring, if in fact, minutes after he had announced his retirement publicly and told his team that Dan Lanning would somehow hop on a plane. Now, I don't know how fast private jets go, but it's a couple hours from Eugene to Tuscaloosa, even on the fastest G6, up in a G6. If that were true, if he was already in Tuscaloosa, that would see the wheels were already in motion, right? So, and it was reported on local news, KVAL down in Eugene, that he was in Tuscaloosa, according to the sources. Now, friend of the program, Josh Pate from Late Kick Live, tweeted out, 15 minutes ago, says, I am Josh Pate with CBS Sports, reporting that Dan Lanning has not been in Tuscaloosa at all this week. So, I think Josh Pate's a little more dialed in for college football than said reporter, who I don't even want to throw his name out there, but said reporter
let me ask
for
you this.
KVAL.
So why is it easy for, and again, just parsing it out, is this all because of the legacy of Alabama? Because let's just say, I would be willing to bet that whatever Alabama would offer financially is in the ballpark of what Dan Lanning said no to Texas A&M with.
Yes.
So is that just, obviously it's Bama, but then that goes back to my point earlier. I don't know if you want to be the guy who follows the legend.
I think the difference is, right, between Texas A&M and Alabama is Texas A&M has not proven it can win a national title. You just can't. There's something else. There's something to it. Alabama's won 6. And played for how many? Played for 4 more? Right, if you count all the playoff appearances, but even the 2 that Clemson won against them, right? And they've had what? Not 10 opportunities in the last 15 years to win a national title. Texas A&M has had 0. 0, zilch, none, nada in the last 15 years.
Alabama's getting close, so they have, just as a legacy, like you mentioned, obviously the 6 was Saban, but 16 overall. I know we talked about that.
They're all fake, though.
But did you know, Justin, that
the one in the 90s, I think they won 92? Is 92 up there?
Let's see. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. 92, that one's legit.
You wouldn't give him 79 or 78?
I don't. Again, I was not around in 79. I was not alive in 78. I'm curious as to who ranked them number 1.
Sure.
Because they claim 26, I think, or something ridiculous like that. And it's the Penny Saver Gazette of Mobile declared us national champions. You lost 3 games.
Actually, I have that for you. Would we say 78? That was AP, FWA, all of them.
Okay, so that one's legit.
But no, it's
there's 8.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Justin, because just to show your point of how old this is, do you actually know which school has the most national championships? You will probably never get it in a million. Claimed, but
is it Army?
They are largely in the 1800s. But
is it Army?
Yale. 18 that they claim.
Dude, 1800s, Yale Bulldogs were a wagon, dude.
Justin, they haven't, not since 1927, baby.
They are a wagon. All right, we've got hour number 3. Dan Pizzuto's going to join the show. We got an RCM mailbag, more coaching carousel talk. That's next, 620 Rip City Radio.
what you need to know. From the Goldberg Jones Sports Desk, your 620 Rip City Radio headlines. Goldberg Jones. Call 1-800-DIVORCE.
It is 8 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Justin Myers with you. It is the wildest coaching carousel day that I can remember, the wildest coaching carousel 24 hours. Let's start with the beginning. Pete Carroll is moving to an administrative role. Doesn't sound like it was voluntary, but he will be moving to an administrative role with the Seattle Seahawks after a 14-year run, including 2 Super Bowl appearances and 1 Super Bowl championship. Then, not to be outdone, the college football world came and said, hold my beer. Nick Saban will retire from Alabama after 17 seasons in Tuscaloosa with 6 national championships, amid multiple reports that Dan Lanning, the head coach of the Oregon Ducks, is Bama's top target. Is he still their top target as we're talking to you right now? Then early this morning, even earlier than when Brenden and I wake up, which is very early, Bill Belichick is out as the New England Patriots head coach. That's according to ESPN. Apparently, a news conference is set for noon Eastern, 9 o'clock our time for a mutual parting of the ways. Dan Pizzuta joins the show in 20 minutes, but the coaching carousel craziness continues in hour number 3 right now at 620 Rip City Radio.
The home of the OSAA is 620 Rip City Radio. It's RCM with Justin Myers, right here on your home of the Portland Trailblazers, 620 Rip City Radio.
All right, it is hour number 3 of RCM. They always say it comes in threes, right? Crazy things, they happen in threes. The universe comes in threes. And in the last 24 hours, we have seen presumably the end of the Pete Carroll era of the Seattle Seahawks, which is the most successful era in Seattle Seahawks history. We saw the end of the era of Nick Saban, not only at Alabama, but Nick Saban in all of college football, which is the greatest era in college football history. And we have seen the end of the Bill Belichick era with the New England Patriots, which is undoubtedly the greatest era and the greatest dynasty in NFL history. That all happened in the last 24 hours. Actually, less than 24 hours. It's a lot of questions. You were sitting here yesterday going like, oh, what are the Bears going to do? What are the Chargers going to do? Is Harbaugh going to lead? So let's count them up. And Brenden, help me out. So the Chargers have an opening. The Raiders have an opening. The Titans have an opening. The Carolina Panthers still looking for a head coach. Now you add the Patriots and the Seahawks. Am I missing one? I believe that.
Did you say the Falcons or Commanders?
Falcons and Commanders. There you go. Thank you. I did not say either of them. 8. That's 8 openings in the NFL, including 2 following legacy coaches. Now,
well, just for fun, Justin, Carolina's got to be the worst, right? Like the one that nobody wants. Like, NFL jobs are so rare. I think everybody wants it.
It's one of 32.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of 32, so nobody's going to turn it down. But I would say,
what's the worst job of all those?
The Commanders is the worst job. But
really?
I don't know with the new ownership if that changes. Historically, of those jobs, right, the Commanders would be the worst. But now that they have new ownership and they seem to be heading in the right direction, I think they're going to do some significant changes in D.C. I think they're going to get a new stadium. I think they're going to change the name of the franchise again, something that's not – they're going to try to erase everything Dan Snyder away.
They change colors?
Potentially.
Like you think like full – like because again –
Now, the team colors predate Dan Snyder.
Right.
I think everything that Dan Snyder brought into the organization, like FedEx Field and all – gone.
Because you told me for a while, like, you know, it's one of those things that I can't comprehend, but very much like how the 49ers were a wagon when you were growing up.
Yes.
That's what the Washington word we don't say now.
Yeah, the previous football team. That wasn't the Washington football team.
They were really good, but like in my lifetime, Justin, they've been terrible. Like all my life, but they won what? 3-4 titles with Joe Gibbs? Something like
Joe
that?
Gibbs was a dude.
Yeah, so they have
Mark Rippon.
A winning culture. Yes.
Well, and that's like
long time ago.
but a lot of those fans, right? That's what they still hold on to. Same as like Cowboy fans, and same as like not really 49er fans. They've been good lately, but yeah, a lot of Cowboy fans kind of like, hey, remember the '90s? We were really good. I think kind of some Bears fans even a little bit, but so
they have 5 championships, 2 from before the merger, but 3 since the merger.
Realistic ranking of the jobs opening right now. Call me a homer if you will. I believe the Chargers is the best job. You got a quarterback. What other job has of all of those teams that I talked about, none of them have a what are they? Turnkey, right? I learned that. I watched the Uber TV show yesterday. Wasn't feeling great. Needed to sit and veg for a little bit, try to get this cold clear.
Yeah.
Watch the Super Pumped. Got 3 episodes in. It's very good. Turnkey operation, right?
Shout out Kyle Chandler. I love him in that.
He's always Coach Taylor to me.
Yep.
But
my guy. But yeah, no, you're gonna get addicted. It's so good.
I think the Chargers are the best job. You're in Los Angeles, new stadium, and you got a quarterback. You're a couple of moves here and there, and Herbert stays healthy. You're in the playoffs next year. I don't think the Patriots a very good job. Same with the reason with Alabama. Do you want to follow Bill Belichick? Now, again, these coaches are wired to everybody can win, I can win. But every other team there, other than maybe Ritter is the guy in Atlanta. I don't know. Maybe. But I don't think whoever takes the Seahawk job is going to stick around with Geno. So you're going to have to draft a quarterback there. Bryce Young is still it's too early to tell whether or not that. And again, kind of unfair to evaluate Bryce Young, right? Didn't play very well. He's also a rookie. And his coach got fired 9 games into the season. I think the Panthers might be the worst job. And here's why. Your owner's nuts. David Tepper he's the second richest owner in all the NFL.
Only behind the Waltons.
He's throwing drinks on fans. He's fired he fired Matt Rule 8 games into the season? And all right, who are we going to hire? Frank Reich. Okay, he just got fired too. Got it. He's going to get fired 9 games in. It's you can't run an organization like that. At some point, you got to let him, work out the kinks. So I think that's maybe the worst job of the NFL jobs.
Yeah, I mean, the fact, like you said, David Tepper, the fact that you're he has triple the money that Jerry Jones has, and you're oh, that's pretty insane.
But in the NFL, how much does that really matter?
It doesn't.
Because you got salary cap and dead cap, and
you
it's
don't.
all
I honestly think you can get away with.
I guess maybe stadium upgrades and culture around the team. But
you don't want a cheap owner, but no, I mean I'm trying to think. You even told me you're up until they got Joe Burrow was. What's his name? Not the cheapest owner in all of North American sports.
It was the Brown family. I think it's Mike. Brown?
Yes.
Either way, it's the Brown family who still do own the Bengals, and the Bengals were notoriously cheap. So, of the teams that are looking for a head coach, I would put the Chargers at number 1. Just because they're the Raiders, I think you got to go Raiders number 2 on this list.
It's Vegas, new stadium, town that's exploding with sports love.
You're always going to be able to get guys to come play for the Raiders. Now they don't have a quarterback; they got Jimmy Garoppolo, but Jimmy G's gone, right?
Oh yeah,
he's done. So I would put Raiders number 2 on the list in terms of ranking the coach. I think I go Tennessee Titans 3. Titans 3 on the list. Then Patriots. Then the Commanders are such a wild card. Commanders are such a wild card because if this new owner is invested, that might be the second best job. If he's invested. I would go Commanders, then Falcons. Nope, not Falcons. Patriots after the Commanders. It's still Robert Kraft. Am I sleeping on Robert Kraft too much? I don't want to be the guy to follow Belichick, and you're going to have to draft Mac Jones ain't it, right? You're going to have to draft a quarterback. You're going to have to find somebody in that, in the draft, or go out and develop a quarterback, but you still got Robert Kraft there, who's pretty invested.
Right, and that organization, you still have that is still New England. That is still, the 6th champion. I mean, that's the thing, Justin. Let's pull everything else aside. I get the Chiefs have 2 rings and this decade too, but it's like when you strip it all away, like it's the Patriots and everybody else since 2000. As far as Super Bowls, winning seasons, MVPs, again, they lost to the Giants, but you have an undefeated regular season in there from Bill Belichick. I mean, no one else has come close to doing that.
Maybe instead of ranking these, we should do tiers.
Yeah. All right.
Let's do tiers. Top tier, like next year playoffs, Chargers. Yeah. I don't think there's another opening where you can say that. Maybe Titans. It depends on how you feel about Will Levis.
Call me crazy, but I do think the right person, there is talent in Seattle. There's talent in Seattle.
Well, they were in the playoffs last year.
There's
they
talent
were
there.
A Green Bay loss away from getting back. If they
That
could
defense,
have just beaten Mason Rudolph at home, right there.
Justin likes saying that out loud.
It's just the most ridiculous thing. Like, how we're still doing this Mason Rudolph thing. So yeah, I'm with you. So Chargers, Seahawks, top tier teams. All right, second tier, which is good job, going to take a little bit of work. Vegas, because I don't think Vegas could make the playoffs next year. And again, this is all with an asterisk, as we learned from the Houston Texans, and we learned watching the NFL at all, which is you get yourself a quarterback, you got yourself a chance.
Yes.
You find a quarterback somewhere, you've got a chance.
And the Raiders still have Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, so it's like you get a quarterback
Max
in there.
Crosby still there.
So, mate, I mean, the only team I'm
By
pretty...
the way, the players voted their all-pro list.
Oh, yeah?
Max Crosby got in as an edge rusher over T.J. Watt. I am biased. Where are you on that?
Well, of course, I think T.J. Watt's a stud. Max Crosby's really good, too. I would have taken
He just broke the sack record.
I would have taken T.J. Watt.
He broke the single-season sack record.
Yeah, I would have. But
Players
Max
didn't
Crosby's
vote him as top 2 edge rusher in the league. He just broke the single-season sack record again.
Yeah, no, they're
All right.
they're both really, really good.
I'm not just being a homer on that.
No, but I do like Max Crosby. But, I think that team, again, the fact that, Justin, they beat the Chiefs when the Chiefs wanted to win a couple weeks ago.
So,
the Raiders are not, the only team I think is going to be terrible is, Carolina. They're not getting any better.
All right, so can go to the playoffs next year. Seattle and Chargers.
Maybe the Raiders.
Gonna need some work, but could. Raiders, Titans, Patriots.
I have very little confidence in the Titans and Patriots. Titans are going to lose Derrick Henry. You're going to have Will Levis and nobody else. And Patriots, even if they...
Maybe it's because it's the uniform thing.
Yeah.
I just think of you're right, Derrick Henry's going.
Yeah, they're going to struggle next year. Patriots probably going to struggle too.
But I think if Will Levis hits, right, if he goes into year 2 and is figured it out, Joe Burrow, remember Joe Burrow got hurt year 1, just like not saying he's going to be the next Joe Burrow, but if he hits... Then third tier, which is it's gonna be some work. Carolina, Commanders, Falcons.
And the Falcons are so much better than those two other teams. It's not even funny. And yet the Falcons are
Are
not
they better or are they just in a crap division? And it's the fact that the Falcons are just in a crap division and it just has masked the fact that they are mediocre to bad.
Yeah, it's that.
They're 7-10.
Atlanta had some dudes, Bijan Robinson is a dude. They have some.
Oh, I love Bijan Robinson, but they gotta have a quarterback.
Right, but Ritter's not it. The Commanders, Sam Howell is not it. The Patriots, Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, not it, Justin. So
they lost to the Saints, the Bears, and the Panthers, and the Bucks.
4 straight losses for the Falcons.
4 out of 5.
Oh, that's why Arthur Smith was fired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was 4 out of 5 to the Bucks, the Panthers, the Bears, and the Saints.
They totally could have made the playoffs.
Totally could have made the playoffs. But that's what happened at the end of the year. And by the way, the loss to the Bears was 37-17, and the loss to the Saints was 48-17. What does that tell you? We're done with the season.
I wonder if Arthur Blank, Justin, the Falcons owner, actually walked down to the field this time.
You never know. All right, we're going to talk to Dan Pizzuta coming up in a bit. Before we do that, I do want to tell you about my good friends at DeBella. Hey, if you're going to be like me later on today, gathering up supplies because you don't know what's going to be happening with the weather this upcoming weekend, how's the roof holding up for that matter. Is it time to maybe give DeBella a call? They're the official home improvement provider of the Portland Timbers. We know Portland weather is going to be brutal. It's going to be brutal this weekend, and if you want to save up to 30% on your energy bill, DeBella can help you take care of your roofing, your windows, and your siding. What do all those renovations do? They keep all that heat inside the house instead of outside the house. Plus, if your roof is leaking or aging and you're a little bit nervous about the White Death that's potentially coming down the pike on Friday night and Saturday, well, get a free quote from DeBella, who has over 15,000 five-star reviews on Google for their excellent work. That's 15,000 customers rating them 5 stars for their great work. And now is the perfect time to connect with DeBella because they've got a financing opportunity of 0 down and no payments until 2025. Of course, that's on approved credit, but you heard me correct. 0 down, no payments until 2025 on approved credit. Roofing, siding, windows, even bath renovations. Visit DeBella, DABELLA.us for a free, no-obligation appointment. They can make updating your home so easy. DeBella, the official home improvement partner of the Portland Timbers. Coming up this weekend, super wild card weekend, and our next guest was planning on coming on the show, probably talk about the matchups and some maybe the weather in Kansas City, weather in Buffalo, Matt Stafford heading back to Detroit, and all the storylines. And then, lo and behold, the craziest coaching carousel in my professional life happened in the last 24 hours. A lot of it affecting us here in the Pacific Northwest, as Pete Carroll is going to be moving on to an administrative role. Joining us now to talk about the coaching carousel, massive amounts of jobs open in the NFL, and we'll dive into some of the NFL playoff games coming up. He is an NFL writer for the 33rd team, friend of the program, Dan Pizzuta, back on the Big Show. Good morning, Dan. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
It has been a whirlwind, let me tell you. From yesterday afternoon when the Pete Carroll announcement came down, and then the Dan Lanning rumors with Oregon and Alabama, and then obviously this morning with Bill Belichick. It's been a whirlwind. Let's start in Seattle, and let's start with kind of your thoughts on the move away from Pete Carroll. I was very surprised by it, especially because after the game against Arizona, he was adamant that he was going to continue to be the coach, and even said so on radio the next day. And then a couple days later, now moving on to an administrative role. That one was a bit surprising to me, Dan. What was your first reaction when you saw that news come down the pike of Pete Carroll now out as the Seahawks head coach?
Yeah, certainly a surprise to me. It sounded like it was also a surprise to Pete Carroll, and probably as late as yesterday morning, sounded like he was, still making his case to be the Seahawks head coach going forward. So, yeah, that's one where you kind of don't really remember Seattle and how a Seahawks franchise was before Pete Carroll came in. It just completely reshaped what that franchise could be from, having that defense, the Russell Wilson era, obviously, the Super Bowls, and even, coming off over the past 2 years, just always being competitive is really, I think, it's such a Pete Carroll, philosophy, but that's also what the Seahawks were. So for, that to come to an end, in the way that it did, right? Because they did miss the playoffs. There were some disappointing things. There were some, defensive things that weren't clicking probably as well as some people in that organization would have wanted. But there wasn't any, drastic, downfall or fallout that really would have made this move obvious. So that is, one of the reasons why it did come as a bit of a shock.
And then probably less shocking, but almost like can't believe it actually happened, and that is the parting of the ways between Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. And I guess it's going to become official in about a half an hour. There's going to be a press conference, but it feels like the reports are out there that Belichick done in New England. Like I said, Dan, not as surprised as this was kind of being rumored around. Like, are they going to trade him? Are they going to, does he even still want to stay there? Does he want to go through a rebuild? But obviously a significant move with Bill Belichick now out. You talked about not understanding or not remembering the Seahawks before Pete Carroll. Boy, I do remember the Patriots. Now, obviously, they had their Parcells years, but I remember the Patriots before Belichick. And interestingly enough, that was the Pete Carroll era there in New England. So kind of nuts to have both of those guys out the same day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what can you really say about the Bill Belichick and that entire just span of Patriots teams? And like you said, it is less shocking because it has kind of been talked about. We've kind of thought that maybe there would be this parting of the ways, but actually having the news come out this morning and that it is final and he's not going to be the Patriots head coach in a time where it does seem like the Belichick, kind of like Carroll, was making his case to stay on and continue to coach the Patriots. He was, doing interviews after the season where he said he would think about if he needed to step back from personnel control, just do more coaching and less on that side. It seemed like he was, open to something. So this is someone who, even at his age right now, it still looks like he's got some coaching left in him. He can still coach. There's obviously been a lot of things that went wrong on the offensive side of the ball over the past couple of years with, who they picked at quarterback, who they picked to coach that quarterback. Bill Belichick's still one of the best defensive minds in the league. This was still a top 10 defense this year. It was a top 2 or 3 defense over the second half of the season. So this is someone who been around but can still coach quite a bit. He has not dropped off quite as much as maybe that record would potentially indicate. So very interested to see what this is going to lead to going forward also.
Dan Pizzuto, who covers the NFL for the 33rd team, joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. All right, writing it down in pencil, not pen, Dan, but just gut instinct. Either one of those guys, whether it's Pete Carroll or Bill Belichick, do you have a feeling that they will be coaching football next year?
I would say Belichick.
Yeah.
Seems to be the favorite there. It kind of seems like this is a mutual parting of the ways in more of a clean break. And, we were listening to the Pete Carroll press conference yesterday where, the plan right now is for him to be, a consultant for the team and still kind of hang around a little bit. So I'm sure he'll probably, explore some coaching options, see if that is, something that is going to be interested. But we've already, heard rumors of teams that are going to be interested in Belichick. And it seems like Atlanta is going to be the big one right now. I think we've heard that, Washington is not going to be one of those teams. That does seem like it would have been more of a Dan Snyder swing to get Belichick to come in than it is this new ownership group. But it seems like Atlanta has been, the very heavily rumored team that is going to be hard going into Belichick. So I would not be surprised to see him end up somewhere next year. And if I had to pick between the two, I'd say Belichick's probably more likely than Carroll, but I wouldn't be surprised if both of them are coaching elsewhere next year.
Dan, one last thing on the coaching carousel, and then I do want to talk about the actual football that's going to be played coming up this weekend. But with regard to the Seahawks, we were talking about it before we brought you on about I think the best job, because they have a quarterback in place, is probably the Chargers. After that, where is the Seahawks? You mentioned they were in the playoffs last year, a winning record this year. They were a Green Bay loss away from going to back-to-back playoffs in the post-Russell Wilson era, and now they're going to be out looking for a new coach. Is this going to be one of those sought-after jobs? Are they going to have a pretty robust coaching search? When you look at the potential future for the Seahawks, I mean, I know Dan Quinn is a name that's popped up a lot because of what he did with the Legion of Boom back in 2013. But what are your thoughts on the Seahawks as an organization and as a job heading forward into next year?
Yeah, I still think it's a good job. There's a lot of talent that has come in, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Right, you're probably going to have to come in eventually figure out what's next at quarterback, which was going to be something that would have to be figured out. At any point, no matter whether Carroll was staying or not. But when you have guys like DK Metcalf and the other the young running backs you can build around it, the offensive tackles, there's a lot of talent on that side of the ball. The defense, you also have a lot of great young talent with Rick Willen and Devin Witherspoon, one of the most fun players in general to watch on the defensive side of the ball this year. So I think it should be an attractive job for candidates, and I hope the Seahawks do realize that because, like you said, Dan Quinn was the name that was thrown out as soon as this news came down, but it does kind of seem like that would be just kind of keeping things similar for the sake of, some kind of continuity, and I feel like that could potentially limit what the Seahawks are looking for and some of the candidates that they'd be looking for if that's kind of their feeling. So I do hope this is a more wide-ranging type of, coaching search that can bring in, a few different types of people that can at least bring in and figure out where they want to go next instead of just kind of honing in on a guy who's been there, who knows the system, who kind of knows the organization. I think this is still a very well-run organization. position. I think it would work well no matter, who the head coach is brought in. So I hope they do kind of expand what they're looking for a little bit. That would kind of be my hope for what this coaching search brings.
Dan Pizzuta, NFL writer for the 33rd team, joins us here on 620 Rip City Radio. All right, games to be played this weekend, and boy, the storylines are lining up for a lot of these games. Let's start in Houston, the Browns and the Texans, with what C.J. Stroud and DeMeco Ryans, first-year coach and rookie quarterback, winning the division and hosting a playoff game. And they're facing off against the Browns. And, Dan, it was funny. A week ago, I said, what I did not have on my NFL bingo card was that the Cleveland Browns were going to be resting Joe Flacco so that he doesn't get hurt for the playoffs. Didn't have that one on the NFL bingo card. What a story with the Cleveland Browns and Joe Flacco and what they have been able to do this second half of the year. And they're 2.5-point favorites on the road against the Texans.
Yeah, and it's really been interesting to see what that offense has been with Flacco, because it hasn't changed drastically in the schematic ways they've kind of drawn up. It's still very heavy play action. It just kind of shows all Cleveland needed was a baseline, competent level of quarterback play for this offense to be functional. And I think you look at all the injuries, they haven't had Nick Chubb since the beginning of the season. They've fluctuated offensive line injuries more than almost any team in the league this year. So there's been a lot going on that offense. It just kind of needs a little bit of stability at quarterback in order for it to work. But the real story in Cleveland has been that defense and what it's looked like under Jim Schwartz. It's been one of the best defenses in the league this year. You just have kind of a difference maker on just about every level of that defense, and it's been really, really good. And that's been the reason they've kind of been able to hang in these games, especially while they were going through that stretch where they were trying to figure out who their quarterback was even going to be during that middle part of the season. So that does bring a lot of pressure on what, C.J. Stroud and that Houston offense is going to be doing. These teams met a couple of weeks ago. Houston was not really at full strength for that game, so I'm not sure how much you can take away there. But no matter what this game brings, it's hard to not be impressed by what Houston has done in this first year under DeMeco Ryans. Obviously, you have the offense and what they've been doing. The defense has started to turn around. I think Will Anderson has been one of the best young defensive players in the league. They've really kind of figured out just how to make that team, which was one of the worst teams in the league last year. It was on the last day of the season was going to go in for the first overall pick, which they could have done. So this turnaround has been really impressive, but I think the Houston offense against the Cleveland defense is going to be a very fun little bit of a chess match between these two, and I think that's, deciding the ball that's going to decide the game.
The game on Saturday night, Dolphins, Chiefs, Tyreek Hill back in Kansas City, but, Dan, I think the story of this game is the weather. Potentially -2 degrees. And, it was for years and years and years, right? It was the Tampa Bay Bucks. They can't win in cold weather. And then finally they kind of got over that hump. And now it's kind of been the same thing with the Dolphins. You take these Florida teams and then you put them in that cold weather. You can't simulate it. You can simulate rain. You can kind of simulate heat a little bit by cranking it up in the bubble facility. You cannot simulate 2 degrees and maybe -4 with the wind chill factor. But Dolphins, Chiefs, both kind of coming into this game, not having the best month of December. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the cold is discomfort, right? I think what actually is going to potentially play a part in this is if there's that heavier wind that's really going. That's when passes start to really be effective, and that's kind of really the weather that is going to be impactful if it tends to be a lot of wind coming in that game. But yeah, these are two teams that obviously we had slightly higher hopes for at the beginning of the season than what they've been toward the end. Miami is tough because they still do everything that you kind of looked at what they were doing earlier in the season. But it started to fall apart a little bit, especially along the offensive line. I think we kind of look at how quick their offense gets rid of the ball in the passing game. It takes away the pressure that Tua faces, and I wrote about this earlier in the week. It kind of part of that is it hides the offensive line because this still isn't a very good pass protection unit. So when they are able to get the ball out as quickly as they do, push it down the field because they have the fastest receivers in the league, it takes a lot of the pressure off the offensive line. But when pressure can get through, it kind of derails everything because this offense is so much based on timing and everyone being in the right spot at the right time. So pressure really hurts this offense. Chiefs are a team that are going to be bringing pressure from all over. They have Chris Jones in the middle. He's a guy who can kind of break through there. So it's going to be a very tough matchup for Miami. Then on the other side of the ball, you look at Miami, and they might call me tomorrow to be one of their edge rushers because of how much they've lost guys on that side of the ball. I think they've just brought in Justin Houston. They brought Melvin Ingram back. So they are down on that defensive line, especially. The corners are still – Jalen Ramsey has been great. Xavier Howard has been in and out of the lineup with some injuries. So Miami's just in a tough spot where they are definitely not coming into this game 100%. But neither is Kansas City. You kind of hope that you had the week of rest for Travis Kelce. I think that is going to be something that definitely helps them. I just kind of hope this is an offense that when it comes down to it, it's Travis Kelce, it's Rashee Rice, it's Patrick Mahomes making plays, and they're not going to try to get too cute. If they're able to do that, I think Kansas City probably has still a pretty good chance to kind of look closer to the offense we've seen them look like over the past few years.
All right, Dan, we got just enough time to talk about one game. I'm going to save my personal because I love the Steelers. 1 to 2 feet of snow, 30-mile-an-hour winds. Clearly, Steelers upset, going to win in Buffalo. So moving on from that. But I think the biggest storyline is, Matt Stafford's going back to Detroit to face off against the Lions, right? Of all the teams in all the leagues, right, the Lions finally, with Dan Campbell, get over the hump. And not only do they win, they thrive. They're 12-5. They win the division. Questionable call in the game a couple of weeks ago, potentially costing them a bye. Instead, they get to host Matthew Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams. Like, of all the quarterbacks to come for that first playoff game at home for forever for Lions fans, of course it's Matthew Stafford coming into Ford Field.
Yeah, and I think this is potentially the most fun matchup of the weekend, where you do have so many storylines in that. You have the Jared Goff against Sean McVay, Stafford coming back. These are two offenses that have just been so good on a schematic level, and quarterbacks who are able to play to their highest degree when they're in these offenses. In the past 2 years under Ben Johnson, Jared Goff, heavy play action with those in-breakers. You have a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Then you have Jahmyr Gibbs, who has kind of opened up that a little bit. You kind of hope there's other health going on Detroit's side of the ball. With the Rams, this has been a complete shift in what they have done. I think Sean McVay kind of reinvented himself in 2021 with the original Stafford offense, and this 2023 offense is completely different from what that 2021 offense was. They've done so many different things. They're more balanced now with a run game that's going to help them out. Kyron Williams has been so good this season. And obviously, Puka Nacua, who has just been a revelation. It's just been, just two offensive minds who are just kind of throwing as much as they can against the wall and have been just so good. So I'm really excited. I'm going to read Rams here because this offense has just been so good. And there's some places on the Detroit defense that can kind of be exploited a little bit. And I trust the Rams and Sean McVay to kind of figure that out a little more than I do for things on the other side of the ball. But I think this is the game I'm most looking forward to watching this weekend.
There you go. Dan Pizzuta, NFL writer for the 33rd team, joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. Hey, Dan, thanks so much for the time. Have a terrific weekend. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Appreciate it.
There you go. All right, we have got one more segment before we wrap up the big show. RCM Mailbag next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, time to wrap up the big show. We have, as we sit here right now, we have no new information on Dan Lanning other than we talked about it earlier. Josh Pate of Late Kick Live, he tweeted out that Dan Lanning is not in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That tweet was liked by Dan Lanning's Twitter account. Now, I don't know if Dan runs his own Twitter account or not. Feels like maybe he does. But
so does that mean we should gear up the happy music, Justin, or not quite? Not quite.
No.
Still hanging on.
Let's not get out over our skis, all right? There is a little thing called tempting fate we will not do. But we've got just a handful of time left in this show. Tomorrow's show, again, same thing. If we have confirmation that Lanning will be staying at Oregon, we've got the happy button. And if he is leaving, we've got the sad button. And they will stick around for a bit. But right now, let's get to the RCM mailbag.
Day, man. Like it, I've had that at night before.
Yeah, I've fried it in the cast iron.
Yeah.
Pan fried it in the cast iron. Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
That was pretty good. But Jason Bateman. How do we feel about Jason Bateman? not like.
You've got like 5-6 inches on that guy. Like
We'll get like.
he's my height, if
But
not
like,
smaller.
Google him up there.
Yeah.
With the hair, I think.
I can see it.
I think Jason Bateman. It's not like too pretty. Like I'm not going like Brad Pitt. He'd have to hit the gym a little bit.
Yeah, Jason Bateman's 5'10", so he's a little taller.
I'm 5'10". So yeah.
Are you like 6 foot?
No, I wish I was.
You
Never
look
made it.
You look taller to me. than you
Never
are.
made it to 6 foot. Wish I did. Didn't. Stuck at 5'10". So that'd be my. I think Jason Bateman could get my humor a little bit as well. I think he could capture the essence that is Justin Myers, host of Rip City Mornings. All right, that's going to do it for the big show. Thanks to Dan Pizzuto. Thanks to super producer Brenden. Thanks to all of you. Have a terrific Thursday. We wrap up the week tomorrow as we hunker down as the White Death is upon us, but we will have a fancy coffee Friday to wrap up the week tomorrow here.